He had a first-class ticket, a private driver waiting at Lagos airport, and exactly 14 days to find a woman who had disappeared 30 years ago. What Reo Hwang did not have was any idea that the moment he stepped onto Nigerian soil, the life he had carefully constructed in Seoul would begin to fall apart, and the woman who would destroy it completely was standing at an arrival's gate holding a sign with his name spelled wrong. It read Reo Hwang. He stared at it. She stared at him. Neither of them smiled. That was day 1. By day 14, one of them would be in a hospital. One would be holding a secret that could bring down an empire. And both of them would be standing at the edge of something neither of them had words for. This is that story. Welcome to Afro-Korean Stories. Before we begin, if you are new here, this channel is your home for the most emotional, most gripping, most unforgettable love stories you will find anywhere on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button right now because you do not want to miss what is coming in this story. And trust me, you are going to want to watch this one until the very last word. Let us go back to the beginning. Reo Hwang was 29 years old, and he had never in his life done anything his father did not approve of. He wore the right suits. He sat in the right boardrooms. He smiled at the right cameras and shook the right hands. He was, by every measurable standard, the perfect heir to Hwang Industries, a conglomerate worth $6 billion that stretched from tech manufacturing in Seoul to luxury real estate in Singapore. He was clean, controlled, and completely hollow. He had known something was wrong with him for years. Not medically wrong, emotionally wrong. Like there was a frequency other people could hear that he simply could not pick up. He watched his colleagues fall in love and felt nothing. He watched his friends get married and felt even less. His father called it discipline. His therapist called it avoidant attachment. Reo called it survival, because growing up in the Hwang household required a specific kind of survival. His father, Hwang Jae-won, was 63 years old and had built his empire on 3 things: ruthlessness, reputation, and absolute control of every narrative that touched his family. Reo had grown up knowing that certain questions were forbidden. Certain rooms in their house were locked. Certain names were never spoken aloud. One of those names was Ngozi. He had found it by accident. He was 17, searching for a document his father had asked him to retrieve from the old study, and he opened the wrong drawer. Inside was a photograph. A woman, dark skin, natural hair piled high, a smile so wide and unguarded it looked almost rebellious. On the back of the photograph, written in faded ink, were 2 words, *Ngozi, Lagos, *. He had replaced the photograph exactly as he found it. He had retrieved the document. He had said nothing, but the name had never left him. 12 years later, 3 weeks after his father suffered a moderate stroke that landed him in a private hospital in Gangnam, Reo finally had access to his father's personal files. He told himself it was for business. He told himself he needed to understand the full scope of the company's holdings to manage things while his father recovered. He was lying to himself. What he found inside those files rewrote everything. His mother, the woman who had died in a car accident when Reo was 2 years old, whose framed photograph hung in the hallway of their family home in Songbukdong, whose grave Reo had visited every year on her birthday, had not died in any car accident. She had left. More specifically, she had been forced out, paid out, erased, and she had not been Korean. She had been Nigerian. A graduate student at Yonsei University, a woman named Ngozi Obi who had fallen in love with the wrong man, conceived a child he refused to acknowledge publicly, and ultimately been handed a settlement that required her silence, her departure, and the surrender of all rights to her son. The woman in the photograph was not a ghost. She was a real person. She might still be alive. She had a last name. She had a country. Reo booked his flight that same evening. He told his father's assistant he was going to check on a business property in Singapore. He told his own assistant he needed 2 weeks for personal reasons. He told no one the truth. He landed at Murtala Muhammad International Airport in Lagos at 6:40 in the morning, exhausted, slightly disoriented, and completely unprepared for what Lagos actually was. The noise alone was a physical thing, layered, alive, unapologetic. The air was humid and thick and smelled like food he could not name, and diesel and something sweetly floral underneath all of it. Everything moved fast. Everyone moved with purpose. And at the arrival's gate, holding a cardboard sign that said Reo Hwang in thick black marker, was a young woman who looked at him the way you look at something mildly inconvenient. Her name was Amaka Obi. She was 26 years old, 5'6", with the kind of face that was always in the middle of thinking something it was not saying. She wore a white linen shirt tucked into wide-leg trousers, her locks pulled back, silver rings on 3 fingers. She ran a small but respected cultural liaison company, Afro Solutions, that specialized in connecting foreign executives and investors with Nigerian partners, translators, cultural guides, and logistics support. She had been hired by the company. Reo's assistant had quietly contracted to arrange his Lagos accommodation and ground support. And she had taken the job because it paid well and because she had rent due on her office space by Friday. She had not been told much about the client except that he was Korean, he was wealthy, and he was looking for someone. She had not been told that the someone he was looking for shared her last name. She lowered the sign when he approached. Reo Hwang. Yes. I spelled your name wrong. Sorry about that. I noticed. She held out her hand. Amaka Obi. I'll be your liaison for the next 2 weeks. I've arranged your accommodation in Victoria Island. The car is outside. Are you hungry? He looked at her steadily. Obi. Yes. Is that a common name? In Lagos. She tilted her head slightly. Not particularly. Why? He said nothing else. He picked up his carry-on and followed her to the car. Amaka drove a 7-year-old Toyota that smelled like air freshener and had a crack in the passenger side mirror. She navigated Lagos traffic the way surgeons handle instruments, precise, economical, absolutely confident. She pointed out landmarks without being asked. She told him which areas to avoid and which to explore. She answered his initial questions about the city in clean, factual sentences that asked for nothing in return. He found himself watching her more than he watched the city. There was something about the way she carried herself that reminded him of the photograph. Something in the set of her jaw. He told himself it was projection. He told himself Lagos was a city of 20 million people and Obi could be anyone's name. He told himself a lot of things that first day. She dropped him at the service department in Victoria Island and handed him a printed itinerary for the following morning. I'll pick you up at 9, she said. You mentioned you're looking for someone. We'll start with records tomorrow. Get some sleep. Lagos takes getting used to. She was already walking back to her car before he could respond. He stood in the doorway and watched her drive away, and something in his chest felt strange. Not attraction, not yet. More like recognition. Like when you hear the opening notes of a song and cannot remember the title but know every word. He went inside. He did not sleep. The record search began the next morning with a visit to a university alumni office in Yaba, followed by 2 churches in Surulere, followed by a registry office that had partially digitized records from the early 1990s. Reo had given Amaka a name, Ngozi Obi, and watched carefully for her reaction. She had gone very still. Not dramatically still. Not the kind of still that announces itself. The kind of still that a person who is used to controlling their expressions falls into when something catches them completely off guard. Say that name again, she said quietly. Ngozi Obi. Amaka set her pen down on the desk between them. They were in a small cafe across from the registry office, waiting for a clerk to pull a file. Outside, the street noise was constant. Inside, between the two of them, it had gone completely silent. That is my aunt's name, she said. Reo breathed in slowly. Is she alive? What is this about? Her voice had not risen. That was the thing about her. She did not escalate outwardly. But her eyes had changed. Who are you exactly? And I want the real answer, not the one your company's booking agent gave mine. He looked at her for a long moment. And then, because he was tired of lying and because something about this woman made deception feel more exhausting than it was worth, he told her the truth. Not all of it, but enough. He told her about the files, about the photograph, about the name on the back. About the settlement document that had sent a pregnant Nigerian woman back to Lagos 30 years ago with enough money to disappear and a legal agreement that ensured she never resurfaced. Tebena listened without interrupting. Her face was a study in contained storm. When he finished, she was quiet for nearly 30 seconds. Then she said, "My aunt raised me. My parents died when I was 9. She was the one who paid for my school, started me in business, taught me everything I know. She is 61 years old and she lives in Surulere and she has never, in 26 years of raising me, mentioned Korea once." Reo felt the air leave him slowly. "I need to meet her." "You need to slow down," Tebena said sharply. "Because what you just described is a man whose father bought my aunt's silence, stole her child, and erased her existence. And you walk into my country and expect me to hand you access to her like a business appointment. I don't expect anything. I'm asking. There's a difference between asking and deserving." "I know." She looked at him, really looked at him, the way she had not allowed herself to before, because it was professional and he was a client and because Tebena Obichina had excellent boundaries. What she saw was a man who was trying very hard to look composed and was not entirely succeeding. There was something around his eyes that she recognized. She saw it every morning in the mirror. Loss wearing a business suit. She picked up her pen. "I'll talk to her first. Alone. If she agrees to meet you, I'll arrange it. If she doesn't, you respect that and we move on. Those are the terms." "Agreed. And I want the full documentation, whatever you found in those files. She deserves to see it regardless of whether she meets you." "Also agreed." Tebena stood, and for the first time since the airport, something shifted in the way she was looking at him. Not warmth exactly, more like the beginning of a decision not yet made. "You should know," she said, gathering her bag, "that if this turns out to be what I think it is, you are not just looking for your mother. You are about to walk into a story that has been sitting unfinished for 30 years. That kind of thing doesn't end cleanly." "I know. I don't think you do. But you will." She left him sitting in the cafe with cold coffee and the sound of Lagos all around him, and he realized he was more awake than he had been in years. That evening, Amaka drove to her aunt's house in Surulere. It was a modest but well-kept two-story on a quiet street lined with mango trees. She had a key. She let herself in and found Ngozi Obi in the kitchen, making pepper soup, humming something old and low under her breath. Her aunt was beautiful in the way that certain women become beautiful over decades, not diminished by time but refined by it. She was small, round-shouldered, with natural gray threading through her hair and the kind of eyes that had seen enough that they had gone gentle on the other side of it. "Amaka, I wasn't expecting you. Sit, there's food." "Auntie." Amaka sat down at the kitchen table. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not say anything until I'm done." Ngozi turned from the stove. She looked at her niece's face. She turned the burner down. She sat. Amaka talked for 20 minutes. She laid it out completely, the client, the name, the files, the settlement, the photograph, the man sitting in a service department in Victoria Island who believed Ngozi Obi was his mother. When she finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Ngozi was looking at her hands. They were folded on the table in a way that seemed deliberate, like she was holding herself together with the simple architecture of interlaced fingers. "His name," she said finally. "What is his name?" "Reo. Reo Hwang." A sound left Ngozi that was not quite a word. It was smaller than that, more private. She pressed her hand flat against the table like she needed the solidity of it. "I named him something else," she whispered. "Before they took him, before I signed. I had 3 days with him. I called him Emeka, my little one." Amaka felt her throat tighten. She reached across and covered her aunt's hand with her own. "Do you want to meet him?" she asked. Ngozi looked up. Her eyes were wet, but she was not crying. "Not yet." "Does he hate me?" "No. He thought you were dead." Another sound. This one broke a little at the edges. "They told him I died." "Yes. J1. The name came out of Ngozi's mouth like something she was discarding. "That man. That cold, terrible man." She shook her head slowly. Then she straightened. The grief was there, but she put it somewhere internal and replaced it with something more purposeful. Yes, I will meet him, but not tomorrow. I need 2 days. Of course. And Amaka. Her aunt's hand turned under hers and gripped tight. Are you all right? Because this is sitting in your house too now. This is your story as much as it is mine. Amaka had not allowed herself to think about that yet. About the fact that the man she had been hired to help was potentially her cousin. About the fact that an entire branch of her family had been surgically removed and planted in Seoul. About all the years her aunt had spent in this house, raising someone else's daughter, never speaking a word about the son she had lost. I'll be all right, she said. I usually am. But she sat in her car outside the house for a long time before she drove home. The 2 days were harder for Reo than he expected. Amaka maintained professional distance. She arranged his meetings with potential local partners that were listed as the official purpose of his trip. She sent him restaurant recommendations. She answered his logistical questions promptly. But she was contained in a way that was different from before. Before, her distance had been professional. Now it was personal. He called her on the second evening. Not for logistics. Are you angry with me? He asked. A pause. Why would I be angry with you? Because of what my father did. To your family. You are not your father. That's not an answer. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm not angry with you, she said. I'm just recalibrating. A lot of things I thought I knew about my aunt's past are different now. I'm allowed to take a minute with that. Of course. Reo. It was the first time she had used just his name. Not his full name with formal inflection. Just Reo plainly. She agreed to meet you. He did not respond immediately. Could not. There was something happening in his chest. A pressure that was not pain but was adjacent to it. When? He managed. Day after tomorrow. Sunday. Her house in Surulere. I'll drive you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be one of the hardest things you've ever done. I need you to be prepared for that. I've been preparing for this for 12 years. Preparing and ready are two different things, she said. Get some sleep. She ended the call and he sat in the dark of his apartment listening to the sound of Lagos at night. Distant music, car horns, laughter from somewhere below. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, he felt something that was almost like hope. And if you are watching this right now and you are feeling what Reo is feeling in this moment, that terrifying suspended hope of something you have wanted for so long you are afraid to actually have it, drop a Lagos in the comments right now. Because what happens on Sunday will rearrange everything. Sunday morning arrived gray and damp, with rain that had started before dawn and had not decided yet whether to stop. Amaka picked him up at 8:30. She was quieter than usual. He did not try to fill it. They drove through the wet streets of Lagos with the radio off and the windows slightly open. And the city smelled like rain and red earth and frying plantain from a roadside stall they passed. When they pulled up outside the house in Surulere, Rio's hands were in his lap and he was very still. Hey! Amaka had turned to look at him. Breathe. He breathed. She's nervous too, she said. That might help to know. You're not walking into a judgment. You're walking into 30 years of grief that is finally going to have somewhere to go. Just be human in there. Whatever that looks like for you. He looked at her. What if it is not enough? What if I am too much like him? You flew to Nigeria alone to find a woman your father erased. You are already the opposite of him. He held her gaze for a moment. Something moved between them, not said, not acted on, just present. Then he nodded and got out of the car. Ngozi Obi opened the front door before they reached it. She had been waiting. She was smaller than he imagined. He had constructed her from a photograph. All that wide, unguarded smile, and the reality of her standing in a doorway in the rain with her hands clasped together and her eyes already full was something his imagination had failed to approximate. She looked at him the way people look at things they lost and found again, with equal parts joy and grief and something that defies categorization. Emeka, she said softly. Then she shook her head. I'm sorry, Reo. Your name is Reo. You can call me Emeka, he said, and his voice was not entirely steady. If you want. She put her hand over her mouth. And then she crossed the distance between them and held him, and he stood in the rain outside a house in Surulere being held by a woman he had searched for across a decade and an ocean, and whatever Reo Hwang had built over 29 years to keep himself from feeling too much simply gave way. Amaka stood at the bottom of the steps. She was not looking at them. She was looking at the rain. But her face was doing something complicated, and she pressed the back of her hand briefly to the corner of her eye before she composed herself. They went inside. The kitchen table became a confessional for the next 3 hours. Ngozi told him everything. The university, the love affair that she had believed was real, the pregnancy she had disclosed too late, the family lawyers who arrived within days, the settlement she signed because she was 23 years old and alone and terrified. She had gone back to Nigeria with enough money to start over but not enough of herself intact to begin again quickly. She had spent years rebuilding. When her brother and his wife died and left a 9-year-old girl behind, she had poured everything into that child instead. Reo listened to every word. He did not interrupt. He did not offer excuses. When she was done, he said simply, "I'm sorry for what he did to you, for the years, for all of it. You have nothing to apologize for," Ngozi said firmly. "Someone should." She studied him. "You look like him," she said quietly. "Same eyes, same jaw, but there's something different in here." She touched her chest lightly. "He was always sealed. You came here. That is not a small thing, Reo." They ate. Ngozi cooked and the kitchen filled with smell and warmth and a kind of ordinary grace. Amaka sat across from Reo and their feet almost touched under the table, but neither of them moved. At one point, Ngozi looked between the two of them with the specific awareness of a woman who has been paying attention her whole life, and she said nothing. But she smiled, just briefly, at her pepper soup. It was 3 in the afternoon when everything changed. Reo's phone had been silent for most of the visit. He had put it face down and left it that way. But when he turned it over after a lull in conversation, there were 11 missed calls. 8 from his father's assistant, 3 from a number he did not recognize, and a text message from his father's personal phone, which Hwang Jae-won had not touched since the stroke. It read, "Come home immediately. Whatever you are doing in Lagos, stop. You are making a very serious mistake." Rio's face went flat. Amaka, watching him, said, "What is it?" He turned the phone so she could read it. She read it. Her expression did not change except for something that sharpened in her eyes. "He knows you're here," she said. "He knows I'm here." Ngozi looked up. She had not seen the message, but she read both their faces without difficulty. "J1, she said. It was the same way she had said it in the kitchen 2 days ago, like a thing she was setting down. His assistant must have tracked the itinerary, Reo said. "I was not careful enough. I used a company credit card for the apartment." He looked at his mother, and that was the first time he had allowed himself even internally to use that word. His mother. It sat in his chest like something beginning. "I'm sorry. He may try to interfere. I don't know what form that will take, but I want to be honest with you about it." "What can he do?" Amaka said. She was not asking out of naivety. She was asking analytically. "You are an adult. You are in a foreign country. He has no legal leverage here." "He does not need legal leverage," Reo said quietly. "He has $6 billion and 30 years of practice at making things disappear. He will try something. He always does." As if to punctuate this, his phone rang again. This time the unknown number. He answered. The voice on the other end was not his father's. It was a man he had never heard before. Calm, professionally neutral, with a Seoul accent. "Mr. Hwang, I represent your father's interests. I would strongly advise you to end your current activities and return to Korea within 48 hours. There are matters affecting the company that require your immediate attention." "What matters?" "Your father has retained a board proxy. If you are not present to contest it within 48 hours, effective control of Hwang Industries will transfer to an external committee. That committee will almost certainly recommend restructuring that eliminates your position." Rio's jaw tightened. "He cannot do that. I am on the board. An absent board member who is currently engaged in activities that the company's major shareholders may find reputationally concerning can and will be overridden. You have 48 hours, Mr. Hwang. The line went dead. The kitchen was very quiet. Amaka said, "Tell me everything." He did. Quickly, precisely, the board structure, the proxy clause, the shareholders, the 48-hour window. He told it like a man reciting a problem he had known was coming and had not prepared for well enough. When he finished, Amaka said, "So he found out you came here, and his first move is to threaten your professional existence to force you home." "Yes. Instead of calling you himself. He has not spoken to me directly in 2 weeks. Since the hospital." Amaka shook her head slowly, not in disbelief, in the slow recognition of a pattern confirming itself. "He is afraid," she said, "not of losing control of his company, of losing control of this." She gestured around the kitchen, at Ngozi, at Reo, at the space between them. "He is afraid of what happens when you and your mother are in the same room." "What happens," Ngozi said quietly, "is the truth." Reo looked at his phone, then at his mother, then at Amaka. "If I go back now," he said, "I stop this before it becomes what he wants to prevent. I protect the company. I protect my position." He paused. "And I walk away from the only real thing I have found in 29 years. Nobody spoke. If I stay," he continued, "I lose the company, maybe permanently. My father will consolidate control through the proxy. I will return to Seoul with nothing." Amaka looked at him steadily. "But you will have gone home with something." "Yes." Another silence. Then she said, "What do you want to do?" He looked at her for a long moment. Something was happening between them that had started at the airport with a misspelled sign and had been building through cafe conversations and night phone calls and a kitchen that smelled like pepper soup, and he recognized it now for what it was. It terrified him in a way the board proxy absolutely did not. "I want to stay," he said. Amaka nodded. "Just once. Then we have 48 hours to build you a strategy." Do you want my help or not?" "Yes." "Then stop looking surprised when I offer it. If you are still watching, and I know you are, this is the moment to subscribe to this channel. Hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Because what happens in the next 48 hours will test everything." Amaka worked fast. She spent 4 hours that evening making calls, to a corporate attorney she knew in Lekki, to a business journalist at a major financial outlet who owed her a favor, to 2 of Rio's Seoul-based board connections whose numbers he gave her with some hesitation. The strategy was precise. If Hwang Jae-won moved to invoke the proxy clause, the move had to be made public before it could be completed. Corporate transparency laws in Korea required board changes to be disclosed within a specific window. If the story broke publicly before the proxy was finalized, the reputational damage to Hwang Industries, the suggestion of a sitting chairman maneuvering against his own son during a medical recovery, would be significant enough to give the shareholders pause. Reo was on calls for most of the night. At 2 in the morning, he was sitting on the floor of his apartment with his laptop open and 3 conversations running simultaneously, and Amaka was on his couch with her own laptop, drafting a communications brief that a Seoul PR contact would disseminate if the trigger conditions were met. At one point, she looked up and found him watching her. "What?" she said. "I was just thinking that you are very good at this." "I know. And that you did not have to help me." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "My aunt spent 30 years carrying something that was done to her. If I can use 48 hours to make sure something is done for her instead, then yes, I did have to." "That is not the only reason," he said. She looked at him. The room was dark except for screen light. Outside, Lagos was doing its nighttime thing. Alive and unhushed, completely indifferent to the drama happening on the 7th floor of a Victoria Island apartment. "No," she said finally. "It is not the only reason." Neither of them said anything else for a long moment. And then Rio's laptop chimed with an urgent notification and the moment folded back into work. But it had been said. By the following evening, the 48-hour countdown was at 6 hours remaining. Hwang Jae-won's proxy move had been filed. Reo knew this because his attorney in Seoul called to confirm it. The board meeting had been scheduled for the next morning. But the financial journalist had published. The story moved fast in the way financial stories do when they have the right combination of family drama and corporate governance. Hwang Industries chairman invokes emergency proxy clause against son during medical recovery. Son reportedly abroad on personal matter. The shareholders started calling. 3 of them had already contacted Reo directly to express discomfort with the optics of the situation. The board meeting was postponed pending review. Hwang Jae-won called his son for the first time in 2 weeks. Reo answered. The voice that came through was quieter than he expected. The stroke had taken something from its edges. Some of the hardness had become fragility in a way that made the hardness worse somehow, because now it had desperation underneath it. You have embarrassed this family, his father said. I found my mother, Reo said. She is alive. She is well. And she remembers every day of those 3 days she spent with me before your lawyers arrived. Silence. Come home. I will come home, Reo said. On my own terms. Not yours. Everything you have is because of me. Everything I thought I was is because of you, Reo said. That is a different thing. And it is something I am currently in the process of separating. You sound like her, his father said. Quietly, almost to himself. Good, Reo said, and he ended the call. He stood in the middle of his apartment for a full minute without moving. Then he picked up his keys and drove himself to Suralere without calling ahead. He knocked on the door at 9:30 in the evening. Ngozi answered in house clothes, surprised. I just needed to see you, he said. I'm sorry, I should have called. Come inside, she said and stepped back. I was watching television. Come. He sat in her living room and she sat across from him and they watched a Nigerian drama series for 2 hours without talking much. And it was the most at home he had felt in as long as he could remember. When he left at midnight, she held his face in both her hands briefly at the door. You are not going to lose everything, she said. You hear me? A man who chose truth over control. That man does not end up with nothing. He covered her hands with his. I'll come back tomorrow. I'll make jollof. He laughed. Actually laughed. Uncalculated, unperformed, and she looked at it like it was a gift. He was halfway down the street when his phone lit up with a message from Amaka. The board postponement is holding. Your attorney says the proxy cannot move forward without majority shareholder support. They don't have it. You won this. Get some sleep. He typed back. Thank you. For everything. 3 dots appeared. Then you would have found your way here regardless. I just helped you move faster. He stood under a streetlight in Suralere with his phone in his hand and typed. Can I see you tomorrow? Not for work. The 3 dots appeared again. Stayed for longer than usual. Then, my aunt's jollof is for you. But I know a place with better pepper soup. I'll send you the address. He smiled at his phone like a man who had forgotten how. And then his phone rang again. Unknown number. Different from before. He answered. The voice was a woman's this time. Cold and clipped and very deliberate. Mr. Hwang. My name is Soo-Yun Baek. I am your father's personal attorney. We have not spoken before. The reason I am calling is that your father has authorized me to share information with you that he has been unwilling to share directly. Information that concerns the settlement made with Ms. Ngozi Obi 30 years ago. Rio's grip on the phone tightened. I have already seen the settlement documents. Not the addendum, she said. His stomach dropped. What addendum? Your father made a provision in the original settlement that was sealed separately. It was never included in the standard file. A brief pause. Ms. Obi did not sign voluntarily, Mr. Hwang. There was a coercive element that, if it becomes public, would expose your father to significant legal liability. He is aware that your current activities increase the probability of that exposure. He has asked me to offer you a revised agreement. What kind of revised agreement? Full financial restitution to Ms. Obi. A substantial settlement increase. A formal retraction of the original silence clause. She is legally free to speak publicly. In exchange, you return to Seoul. You take your position on the board. You do not pursue further contact in Lagos. Reo stood completely still. He wants to buy my silence, he said. Again. From another generation. He wants to manage the situation. He wants to pay me to abandon my mother the way he paid her to abandon me. His voice was measured, quiet, more frightening than if it had been loud. Tell my father that his money is not the language this conversation is going to happen in. Tell him the addendum will be disclosed to Ms. Obi's attorney. Tell him the sealed provision will be examined. And tell him that the only thing I want from him is the truth. Spoken out loud, in a room, to the two people he spent 30 years lying to. A long pause. Then, I'll relay the message. Do that. He hung up. He stood in the street and breathed. The night was warm and full and very real around him. He could hear music from a nearby compound. He could smell pepper and something sweet and the particular signature of a city that refused to be quiet. He called Amaka. She answered on the second ring. What happened? He told her. All of it. The addendum, the coercive element, the offer, his response. When he finished, she was silent for 4 seconds. Then, there was coercion. Yes. Then she has grounds for a legal claim. In Korea and possibly internationally. The sealed provision, depending on what it contains, could reopen the original settlement. Yes. Reo. Her voice had shifted. Something underneath the analytical precision had come through. Something warmer and more careful. This just became a lot bigger than a reunion. I know. Are you all right? He considered the question seriously. In the past, he would have answered automatically. He is fine. He is always fine. No, he said. Not entirely. But I think I am on the right side of it. For the first time. Amaka exhaled slowly. Okay. Come to Ngozi tomorrow with the attorney's contact information. We are going to handle this properly and we are going to handle it together. Amaka. Yes. I'm glad the name on the sign was spelled wrong. A beat. And then a sound that was unmistakably a laugh. Quiet, surprised, quickly contained. Get some sleep, Hwang. Good night, Obi. She hung up. He walked back to his car through the Lagos night smiling again. The next 3 days moved fast and hard. Ngozi Obi sat with her attorney, a fierce woman named Adago Nwik who had spent 20 years in international family law, and reviewed the sealed addendum in full. It was as damaging as the attorney Suyun had implied. The original settlement had been obtained under conditions that included direct professional threats against Ngozi's student visa status and a misrepresentation of Nigerian family court provisions that had been used to convince her she had no legal claim to her child. It was not legally coercion in the violent sense, but it was the slow, systemic kind. The kind built from power and fear and a 23-year-old woman with no one in her corner. Adago said it plainly. This is actionable. Reo sat in the room when this was said. He watched his mother's face process it. He watched her not cry. She had done her crying, he understood. What was on her face now was something more complicated. The relief of being believed after 30 years of carrying something you could not say. Amaka sat beside him. Their arms were almost touching. Neither of them moved. On the 4th day, Hwang Jae-won flew to Lagos. Nobody had expected this. It was the one move none of them had predicted, that the man who for 30 years had only ever exerted force through proxies and attorneys and financial instruments would actually board a plane. He arrived with 2 assistants, a private physician, and the bearing of a man who knows he has lost the battle but is determined to lose its standing. He was thinner than Reo had seen him since the stroke. But his eyes were the same, sharp and hooded and seeing everything. He came to the house in Surulere. The door was opened by Amaka, who looked at him the way she looked at things that required careful handling and said, "We were not expecting you." "I imagine not." He looked at her steadily. "You must be Amaka." "I am." "You have her eyes," he said quietly. He was looking at something slightly past her. Then he seemed to catch himself. "Is my son here?" "Everyone is here," she said. "Whether you come in is your decision." He came in. The living room of Ngozi Obi's house was not designed for this kind of confrontation. It was a lived-in room. Photographs on the walls, fabric on the chairs, the particular warmth of a space that had been home for decades. Hwang Jae-won stood in it and looked around slowly, and something moved across his face that he did not fully succeed in suppressing. Reo stood up. They looked at each other. Reo did not speak first. And then Ngozi came in from the kitchen. She stopped when she saw him. He stopped when he saw her. Time did something strange in the room. Ngozi, he said. J1, she said. They looked at each other for a long moment across 30 years and a living room in Surulere, and whatever had existed between them before the lawyers and the money and the silence, whatever young and reckless thing they had been to each other at 25, passed between them briefly like light through a gap before the clouds close again. I came to talk, he said, without lawyers, without proxies. He glanced briefly at Reo. I owe that much. You owe considerably more than that, Ngozi said. Her voice was calm. But talking is a start. They sat. And the conversation that followed was not dramatic in the way that 30 years of suppressed pain might make you expect. It was instead exhausting and strange and at moments achingly human. Hwang Jae-won explaining the decisions he had made from inside the logic of a world where family shame and corporate legacy were the only coordinates he had known. Ngozi listening without absolution, asking the questions she had held for 3 decades, receiving answers that were inadequate and honest in equal measure. Reo did not speak much. He sat and watched his father navigate the consequences of choices made when Reo had not yet been old enough to understand choices, and he felt something that was not forgiveness, not yet, perhaps not ever, but was the beginning of the end of the kind of hatred that lives rent-free and takes up all your inner space. Amaka sat beside him through all of it. At some point her hand found his, and their fingers linked quietly without announcement, and neither of them addressed it or looked at the other. They just stayed that way. Hwang Jae-won noticed. He looked at their joined hands, and then at Rio's face, and for the first time something in him, some last locked room, came open. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But a crack. I will drop the proxy claim, he said quietly to Reo. Fully. The board remains as it was. Reo nodded. The settlement with Ngozi, whatever the attorneys determine is owed. I will not contest it. Ngozi said, This is not about money. I know, he said. It never was. But it is the only language I have spoken fluently for too long. He looked at her. I regret it. All of it. I understand that means very little. It means something, she said. Not warmth, but acknowledgement. It is not enough, but it is something. He left 2 hours later the same way he had come in, quietly, without theater. His physician was worried about his fatigue. At the door he paused and looked at Reo. Your mother used to say the same things you say, he told him. When we fought, the same expressions, the same way of going quiet instead of loud. He paused. I thought I had taken that from you, that you had become only mine. He looked almost sad. I was wrong. Reo looked at him for a long moment. Goodbye, father. Come home when you're ready. I will. Hwang Jae-won left. His car disappeared around the corner of the Mango Line Street and the Lagos evening closed around its absence. Reo stood in the doorway for a moment. Then Amaka was beside him. Are you all right? She asked. Same question she had been asking all week. She asked it differently each time, shaped to what she saw in him at that specific moment. Yes, he said, and this time it was true. You should know, she said, that this is deeply, genuinely outside the scope of my professional services. I know. AfriLink Solutions does not typically involve itself in intergenerational family litigation and emotional reconciliation. I'm aware. I will be sending you a revised invoice. He turned and looked at her, and she was already looking at him with that expression he had been cataloging since the airport, the one that was always thinking something it had not said yet. Put whatever you like on it, he said. I plan to be around long enough to dispute it in person. She was quiet for 1 beat. 2. How long are you planning to stay in Lagos? I don't know, he said honestly, but I would like to find out if there is someone here worth staying for. There are 20 million people in this city, she said. You would need to be more specific. Amaka. Reo. I am being more specific. She looked at him. The evening light was doing something particular to the mango trees on the street, making them gold green and warm, and Lagos was being its loud, irreducible, magnificent self around them, and Amaka Obi stood in the doorway of her aunt's house and let herself be seen by someone who was looking at her like she was the point of the whole story. "You have a company to run," she said quietly. "I can run it from anywhere." "That is not true." "It is increasingly true. And I want to make it more true." She looked at him for a long time. Then she stepped slightly closer, not closing the distance completely, but changing it. "My aunt likes you," she said. "I like her. She thinks you are good. I am trying to be. She also thinks—" Amaka stopped. "What does she think?" "That you look at me the way your father looked at her when they were young. Before everything." She met his eyes. "She says it differently, though. She says you look at me like you already know the answer, but you're waiting to be asked the question." He was quiet. The city moved around them. Somewhere nearby someone was playing a song. Something with a slow, deliberate beat, the kind that does not rush. "What is the question?" he said. Amaka smiled. Finally, fully, the way she had been guarding all week. It was exactly like the photograph. Wide and unguarded and a little bit rebellious. "That's for you to figure out," she said. "You're smart. You'll get there." She went back inside. He heard her laughing with Ngozi in the kitchen about something. The sound of it, easy and real and full of the particular music of two women who love each other, was the best thing he had heard in his life. He stayed in Lagos for another 3 weeks. He told his board it was an extended business development trip. He told his father's assistant his return flight was being rescheduled. He told Amaka on the 4th evening of the extra time that he had canceled his apartment and asked her to recommend somewhere better to stay. She recommended nothing. She offered nothing. She waited. He found a short-let apartment 2 streets from Ngozi's house in Surulere. He ate jollof rice at his mother's table 5 times in 3 weeks. He learned to navigate Lagos traffic badly and then less badly. He sat through 2 of Amaka's client meetings because she said he could observe, and he said that was fine when really he just wanted to be in the same room. He learned that she woke up early and worked late and took very short lunch breaks and never complained about any of it. He learned that she was building AfriLink solutions from something small into something significant, and that she had a clarity about what she wanted that he found more attractive than anything he had encountered in Seoul boardrooms. He learned that when she was tired she rubbed the side of her neck absently with her right hand, and that she had opinions about everything and stated them without hedging, and that she cried at nothing and laughed at everything. He told her all of this one evening when they were walking along the water at Falomo, and she looked at him sideways and said, "You have been studying me." "Yes. That should be alarming." "Is it?" A pause. "No," she said. "Which is alarming in itself." He stopped walking. She stopped a half step later and turned. The water was dark and the city lights were everywhere, and she was looking at him with that complicated, unguarded expression, and he said, "I don't want to go back to being sealed." She understood what he meant. "Then don't. That requires someone. It requires yourself first," she said. "The rest follows." He stepped closer. "And if the rest is you?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached up and straightened the collar of his shirt. Unnecessary, deliberate, and said, "Then you had better learn to eat pepper soup properly because you are still terrible at it." He laughed. She laughed. And in the gap between 2 laughs in the Lagos night, he kissed her. Quietly, without announcement, the way good things begin. And she kissed him back with the full, unreserved weight of someone who has decided. When they stepped apart, the city was still going. Lagos had no interest in pausing for anyone's romantic moment, and Reo found he loved it for that. It was so aggressively, magnificently alive. "What happens now?" he said. "Now you go home," she said. "Handle your company. Handle your father. Do the work you went to Seoul to do." She held his gaze. "And then you come back. And you'll be here. I'll be building my company and living my life and being very busy," she said. "But yes, I'll be here." 3 months later, Hwang Jae-won formally acknowledged Ngozi Obi in a legal document that was attached to the settlement resolution. It was not a public statement. It was not an apology in any form that satisfied anyone fully. But it was his signature on paper that said, "This woman is the mother of my son, and the terms of the original settlement were obtained in a manner I am prepared to remedy." It was Ngozi told Amaka on the phone the evening the documents arrived. More than she had expected and less than she deserved. Is it enough? Amaka asked. Her aunt was quiet for a moment. Enough is not the right word for 30 years. But it is sufficient to build from. And I have my son. That I did not think I would have. Reo was on a video call with Ngozi every Sunday. It was not discussed or arranged. It simply became the shape of things. Sometimes he called from his office in Seoul, sometimes from an airport. Once from a car stuck in traffic on the highway. Ngozi did not mind. She talked to him about her garden, her neighbors, the drama series she was watching, her opinion on the new restaurant that had opened on her street. He listened the way people listen to things they are afraid of losing. Carefully, completely. Amaka and Reo operated at the pace that long distance demands. Calls that ran past midnight, weeks of ordinary life punctuated by the particular concentration of time spent together. He came back to Lagos 4 months after the first trip. She came to Seoul once. Tentative, curious, navigating a city that was everything Lagos was not and finding it beautiful in different ways. Ngozi asked her about it later. He held my hand the whole time, Amaka said. Every time I looked uncertain. He just held my hand. Good, said Ngozi, with the satisfaction of a woman whose opinion has been confirmed. It was not a simple love story. Reo carried years of sealed emotion that required patience to reach. Amaka carried the weight of having built everything herself for so long that receiving help felt uncomfortable in ways she had to actively resist. They fought, not dramatically, not with exits and ultimatums, but in the quiet way of two people who are both accustomed to self-sufficiency trying to learn a shared language. They kept at it, because that is the other kind of love story. Not the kind where everything is overcome in a single moment. The kind where two people look at each other across the ordinary difficulty of being human and choose, repeatedly, imperfectly, with full awareness of the cost to stay. Hwang Reo, 29 years old, had come to Lagos to find a ghost. He had found instead a mother who had never forgotten him, a woman who made him want to be less sealed, and the beginning of understanding that the life built to his father's specifications had been a very expensive cage. He left it open on his way out. And Amaka Obi, who had picked up a client at the airport with a misspelled sign and absolutely zero expectation of anything beyond the professional, had found, without looking for it, which is the only reliable way such things arrive, that someone was looking at her like she was the whole point of the story. She was not wrong. He was. Lagos knew all along. And that every detail of it is exactly how it happened. If the story moved you, if you felt something watching Reo find his mother, or the moment Amaka finally smiled, or anything in between, please like this video right now. Takes 2 seconds and it means everything to this channel. Subscribe if you have not already. Every single story here is created for you and your support keeps them coming. And in the comments, I want to know, what moment hit you hardest? Drop it below. We read every single one. This has been Afro-Korean Stories. I will see you in the next one.